Testing. Okay, looks like we're on. Hello, everybody. Haven't done one of these in a while, mostly because we did everything last year, but welcome to our follow-up State of the Union. I think we did the last one in April last year. Hopefully everybody knows me now. Christian Taylor, head of the open source office slash incubation now. And I got with me Tex. I think everybody knows him now.
Hey, if everyone doesn't know me, I mean, we got some other problems, but we will figure those out. So yes, I'm Tex. I'm the open source program manager here at Intersect. You'll probably know me for getting involved in just about anything. I'm always willing to help lend a hand, but primarily my focus is going to be on the developer advocate program and a lot of other programs that we have launching with our paid open source model. So,
Yep. So I don't know if everyone watched the one last year. We kind of did the State of the Union because we had just launched the YouTube channel and trying to evangelize what open source was supposed to mean at Intersect and then the effects of the ecosystem abroad. So we went into why open source was critical, why Intersect, stuff like that. So I'm going to build off of that story to be where we are now within a year. So bear with me. There's a lot of detail to this. I don't want to get too nuanced with granularities, but I think we'll do a brief recap of where we were. Let me see if I can hide this ugly thing. Yep. Okay. So when we're talking the State of the Union, Intersect open source, where are we in 2025? I'm going to assume everyone watched the 2024 video, but brief oversight on that. So the first 5 slides of this are going to be from that deck, which is why did we do open source, framing that situation. Obviously, what we considered core Cardano, which was the 28 repos we took from IOHK under Intersect, which were the OG Haskell nodes, was that they were not efficiently open source. Yes, they had the license. Yes, they were on GitHub, but there wasn't necessarily best practices or open interactions. Some had roadmaps. It was kind of sporadic what you were getting from that. So the open source office and the open source committee were established to tackle the issue by creating a strategy, which was done. And then we basically wanted the community to come more into it and actually own the OG node and be in it and help form us and our open source practice to their desires. Now, with that, we did some research, and the main issues with the open source and core Cardano was the slow development, complexity, lack of community engagement and transparency, accessibility, centralization, and limited documentation. Now, from that stemmed what we came up with for pillars that could have been in the open source strategy. But after going through almost 2 months worth of debates, we settled on 3, which is we needed to get governance and decision making across to these repositories. That way we have a more formal structure and a constant way to hit the next one, which is that community engagement and collaboration. So that way people know how to get in there, contribute, escalate issues, be able to reach out to maintainers and help develop project roadmaps. And then the technical sustainability in the sense that all of these are working together. Now, what we had done parallel that from the open source office side was while the committee set the strategy and we were to execute that, we, as in the open source office capacity, were able to tag on other items to help address these, which is launching the developer advocate program, trying to get more voices and enable community people to lead those conversations. We did the community maintainer process, which is how do we take someone, a community member who doesn't have entity affiliations, into the core code process and get them to interact. Shout out to Adam Dean for helping pioneer that. And then a contribution ladder, which is how you define contributor roles in a general framework that projects can adapt to their use case, about how you could end up becoming a core maintainer on a project. A support service catalog, which we've gotten to test, which is things that we as the open source office Intersect can offer our membership base as well as the broader ecosystem on a first come first serve basis, and then pilots associated with those. And I think everyone knows our Bitergia reporting, just kind of health assessments that we've done every month on the core repos. Now I'll pass it to Tex.
Yeah, just a few key highlights you got to him there at the end. The Bitergia reports are super, super important for everyone. If you haven't gotten a chance to go and read through those, I encourage you to do so. It does speak to where we did see initially some slow development, but also the varied periods of development. So we got a great opportunity to see not only just the health of Cardano's development, but the shift over time. What areas of the core code base were more important, and you'll see that even as we come through various hard forks. But yeah, let's take a look at what we were doing specifically from the committee side, and then a lot of the work that Christian and I took on from the open source office side, but where those are tied to those original issues. So the developer advocate program, I would say we're rather proud of that. I think it worked really well for the first go around. There's tons of feedback, and we're very much focused on implementing that for our next go around, which we are targeting an August start date, so August of 2025. Where again, our reporting is up to date monthly for the entire year at this point since we started our partnership with Bitergia Analytics there. So keep an eye out for that. And then also, if you happen to be going to Open Source Summit, I will see you at ChaosCon talking a little bit more of a deep dive. We do have our service catalog. We've been doing a lot of marketing and really just community outreach with various projects to make sure that they're getting some spotlight. And that leads into offering the contribution ladder and showing how developers, whether focused within a single project or wanting to grow in terms of developing for projects on Cardano or just core Cardano, how they can move up in those ranks. The other side here, I'm going to go to the committee side. These are a lot of policies that they put through that are really grounding our ability to keep moving forward. And so the open source committee did draft and review the security policy before that went off to the technical steering committee and the security council. We also had our project framework life cycle, and that's been the basis for what we're going to see for our incubation that we have planned as part of the paid open source model. The governance policy is super important. This helps us keep the repos in check. And although we're still working on achieving that, as close to 100% metric as we can, we're going to be looking at enhancing that governance policy over time, and it at least gives a stable foundation for how these repos, how these projects can initially get their development underway. We have the project incubation policy specifically, which is, again, the evolution of the project lifecycle framework. And so within that incubation, we actually go into detail about where is your project? Can it be considered a mature project? Are you still growing? Or have you actually already experienced a growth phase and maybe now you're in decline? And really what that does is assigns a label to it. The last part is the strategy, but the strategy has kind of been the lifeblood through all of that, right? The strategy helped push out all of those policies, and the open source committee has been really, really great with tons of community contribution. We've now been through, I think, 3 cohorts with the open source committee, and that's a cohort is 4 to 5 individuals, experienced individuals that have been sitting on the committee for a period of 6 months or more. If we jump back to the open source office here, we'll get down to the pilots, the community maintainership, and then validating true open source. So a lot of these have tied together just on a real, let's say, test basis there. But it set the stage for what we'll talk about in a little bit, again, that paid open source model, and how are we actually addressing all of these issues that we found or that were called out by the community, rather, with Cardano's development.
100%. So leading into that, we also do, if no one has given it eyes to it, we do have a roadmap for the open source office that we run through with the committee. I will give the caveat there, in Q4, whenever budget conversations started going, that's when we started having a backlog of items because we had to figure out what we were doing related to budget. Obviously, everyone knows the pivot in that process. But essentially, Q1 through Q3, we achieved our goals, which is getting the governance foundation together, setting up pilots, associated policies, and optimizing those, and then focusing on collaboration and compliance, which is enabling making sure that everything that we set up was mature for its state at that point in time. And then we went into Q4 with continuous improvement. Now, the thing that's in progress and things we haven't started, we need to optimize the release management process, which I think is mostly there, especially through our hard fork coordination working group, as well as open source policies and strategy, refining those. there's a lot of lessons learned that we just need to catch up on and reiterate those into the documentation. But I think things are mostly together there. And then the release management is going to change again once incubation takes live and we start incorporating more projects. And the definition of what we call core Cardano changes based on that. And then we do have ideas for inclusion, as well as legal compliance and audits. Those are in work. We're bringing on some legal vendors to help us with that. So more to start on that. And our inclusion program is actually going to tie into another work stream, which is tied into our 2025 roadmap. And these two, we should be able to close most of these here shortly before the end of Q2. But we are working on expanding the governance structure. That's hiring for the open source office, specifically an open source evangelist role. That's guaranteed budget and everything goes through for Intersect. What that evangelist role is going to allow me to do is have a community manager for open source, and as well as a technical SME to help go to different structures, evangelize for us, tie in project leads, also do data analytics and manage our comms and things like that. So that will be a community hire in the future. So just keep an eye open for that if everything goes through. We also, and that's going to tie to the enhancing community engagement. We are looking at an accreditation program. So if anyone's seen Jack Briggs talk about it, it's trying to find the existing talent within Cardano and trying to certify who these providers are, similar to other open source ecosystems. So that way, if you're looking at someone to do work with, they can be accredited, as in a less risk doing business with them. We are doing a launch of open source education and training, so keep an eye on that page. Everything's in draft, so we'll start with an update on the knowledge base of where existing things are in the ecosystem that you can engage with, and then working with partners in that to enhance that and have more training brought in. We also are doing a recognition reward system that actually has started after this deck was drafted. I'll have more coming up on that in the next 2 weeks. As well as Q2, when we were going from into ecosystem and project integration. I think everyone knows that the contributor ladder went live, as well as our incubation process. We'll be publishing the updates on our lessons learned from our 60-day pilot with that here shortly, as well as we're working on implementing security and compliance initiatives. So you'll notice that all our security MDs were updated. The Security Council has been active. We've already worked with some issues there related to incidents that were reported and dealt with. So I'll be pointing out where you can find the reports on those issues that were publicly released. And then we are improving the documentation standards and advanced metrics and reporting. So all this, y'all might have seen that project lifecycle piece that we tied in with the committee that they set up, as well as the incubation acceptance criteria. We are taking that and doing a thorough audit of all the projects under Intersect right now, and then their maturity grade. And all this will lead into work of how we evaluate projects within the paid open source model, whether they're under Intersect or not. But all those things are coming. We should be caught up to date by the end of Q2. It was just get budget organized, then hit our backlog. Now, what we're looking for in Q3 and Q4 is the strategic collaboration and diversification. And this ties in directly with our paid open source model. Basically, we're going to find the talent that's in the ecosystem and create bridges to build talent, bring people in via the maintainer retention program into core projects. We'll have a summer of code equivalent, not necessarily during the summer. We still got to figure out the timeline for it. But those education opportunities help people go into the contribution ladder program, find out where their talents lie, and then bring in projects via the incubation and or the tooling sustainability budget. So this is a lot of information. I just want to clarify and be honest where we are and how between the committee and Tex and I, the amount of work that we are doing. I'm trying to be more transparent with this process. So if you have specific questions on here, DM me, Tex on Discord, Twitter, YouTube comments, even Slack channels, email if you have it. We're here to answer all these things. But all of this work leads into this magical thing we call the paid open source model. We worked with a bunch of industry experts. We do have the link to it on our Gitbook as to what we were trying to do with enhancing Cardano's open source model. Um, and from where I sit as the head of the open source office, I wanted to institute this, but I had to do it from where my limits are. And so that's starting with Intersect and then using the whole budget process to help elevate that. In the future, I want it to be independent of Intersect, where this process and this program can work, but we are going to pioneer it and get the lessons learned and refine it before we execute it ecosystem wide, or I guess entity independent is a good way to put it. But I'll do the 5-minute highlight here before we go to the next slide and pass it back to Tex. So most of this is the same. And the brief highlight of how it works is you have Intersect. We host core projects, at least what we're calling core for now. And then you have the software lifecycle development or software development lifecycle, which is housed within the delivery assurance function of Intersect. Now, within that, I was trying to think of different programs we could institute to support that. And that's where the code forest model helps the ideation productization phase, which is where you can do a bug bounty kind of program, but for feature development to reward contributors to helping ideate specific features projects need to have that don't have the time to do themselves. The other 4 phases is where we get into the maintainer retention program, which is where they can technically validate changes, help with budgeting, implementation, and measurement. And that's bringing in potentially 100 people to 50 projects for the community to decide what those 50 projects are that are supported. All of that's going to be under the remit of the committee as the budget holder. The open source office sits there as the executor. And within that, we start to get back down into the actual projects from Intersect, which is I broke it into 2 categories for simplification, which is products and open source libraries. The red box around that is our support structure that Intersect offers for it, which is the incubation and contribution ladder. Those 2 programs are self-explanatory. And then from those 2 categories of projects, we have 2 working groups to support them. For open source libraries, we have a tooling working group. They will have a 2 million ADA support bracket to help sustain projects in Cardano. The committee is going through a stipend kind of approach for that to help projects survive and work. And that'll be a community-driven decision-making process before the OSC stamps off what projects are supported. Now, with the product side, we actually had an accelerator program the commercialization working group came up with, and that's to help 10 projects pre and post Catalyst is kind of the idea, and help get the mentors and mentees. It's not going to be the size of the Draper University thing, but this is for us to pilot how we would do it from the Intersect side. And then within the big umbrella of all this is you do have our strategic partnerships like Patergia, our enterprise members, and the support services that they can offer. We also have some Linux Foundation connections and help amplify any of these open source programs. You do have the developer advocates from the open source office as well. And to all of this, everything that's in that red dotted umbrella is to support open source development. That way you have a sustainable model where you don't have to worry about Log4j or a random project having a break, no one there to maintain it, no financial support for maintainers, and ensuring that the critical things that we are building on, even if it's one guy in his garage, are secure. So that way businesses are attracted to build and have that peace of mind when they use Cardano, other than our security and robustness already, that when they build, they can actually just go straight for commercial adoption, help build the ecosystem. We have those 3 pipelines, commercialization working groups trying to help projects with, and then through that replenish the treasury, and the cycle continues. So I don't think I got that under 5 minutes, but happy to talk about this. We have explainer videos, the white paper, etc. Now, forewarning, the next slide is ugly, but we had to get it out there. This is everything we talked about in a status format. And we don't have to cover this in detail, but Tex, is there anything you want to highlight about what's going on?
Yeah, well, let's take a look here. So a few highlights just from before, so you can see it in a different format as the open source strategy, the treasury reporting, community maintainership, all of those are in that up and running status, right? Um, the Bitergia footprint analysis is in line with our Bitergia reporting, and without our monthly reporting, that footprint analysis actually would not have been as successful. And Bitergia is a strategic partner. So some of these tie together, but the foundation of those programs, of those policies that we've enacted here are still individual and set the stage for other partnerships that we'll develop. As far as some of these things that are listed as implementation or pilots, so the project lifecycle, acceptance criteria, the white paper with the paid open source model, the contribution ladder, a lot of these are requiring the paid open source model to actually be initiated. And so that's what we're really hopeful for into the rest of 2025 and carrying over into 26 and beyond, is that we can effectively utilize the budget that has been awarded to us by the community, right, or been awarded to the committee to really start off that paid open source model and prove that concept. A few things that you see in draft are, again, some of the other things that are part of that paid open source model as well. So on the right side here, the bug bounty program, maintainer retainer program, and even the accreditation. So again, some of these are key portions of the paid open source model, and then also key requirements to help validate that we're choosing the right people, right, or that the right people are being selected and are being selected, excuse me, by the community. So when they says they're still in draft, we've started these drafts, right? We just can't put them in implementation or pilot yet until we actually have funding for these programs, and so what's actually going to approve or allow for their implementation here. Just to touch on some of these other ones here, again, governance, security, developer advocates. On the right side, again, here's Security Council and the SWOT analysis. With the assistance of the commercialization working group and then the actual formation and existence and work of the Security Council, I'll tell you right now, we wouldn't be where we are today, and may not have even gotten out the paid open source model in terms of a white paper or ready for implementation without knowing those key features and without having the security backing of the council. So hopefully this can kind of give a what do you call it, a good view of everything that we did for the foundation, the foundational concepts that get us to actually developing and implementing this paid open source model.
100%. And we'll make this easy for anyone to access, so don't worry if you didn't catch everything through there. But the final thoughts I wanted to add to this is to show you it's not just me and Tech sitting and just writing documentation for the fun of it. These are executed programs that we go through 3 phases, which is where we ideate, draft it, peer review it, even academic peer review if we need it, then put it to the council, get it approved, do a pilot and an implementation on a small test case so we know how we can actually scale it when we go up and running with it. So everything we have done foundationally is to lead to making Cardano seen in the real world as a mature open source ecosystem and not just code on GitHub. Me and Tex and the open source committee have been working hard that we, at least through Intersect right now, is that we can be seen as a Linux Foundation level, try to get among these titans and be mentioned with them with our level of practice, clarity, transparency, and pathways for engagement. That's kind of been my mission in open source for Cardano, and this is what I'm trying to give back to the ecosystem. That way it actually has all the mechanisms and things in place so that this can survive without us. If Thanos snaps his fingers, everything's still together.
I'll tell you, I'd love to give a call out to everyone here because I think probably one of the biggest questions, or if not the question that we get the most, is how do you get involved? How do I get involved, right? And so the one thing I'll tell you is definitely make sure to have read through, and I'm going to say read through, not just browsing through, all of the documentation and all of the programs that we have. It's all available on our Gitbook, and we're continuously working on improving that format as well. Once you've reviewed the documentation, then you'll want to add the videos on top of that because the videos will help you understand it all. If you're coming to get involved with the open source committee and you haven't done those 2 things, it's not to say that you don't have the right ideas or that you're not able to contribute, but you need that understanding. And we've been trying to do everything that we can to provide it. That leads me to the other side of what I wanted to say, which is if we haven't provided something, if something is unclear to you despite its peer-reviewed nature, please let us know. So if you want to blow us up at Intersect OSO on X, please feel free to do so. If you want to just send that to us privately, you have the option of sending us an email, oso@intersectmbo.org. We are primarily open to any and all feedback that we receive. And I'll tell you that all of our documents are at a state where they are ready to be iterative. So whether it's something that's produced, whether it's something that's still in draft, even if we've had peer review from other experts in the field, we're still more than happy to take that feedback from the community as well. But again, how do you get involved is of course, follow what's been done so far and get the understanding of how that all works together cohesively. And then let us know where maybe we got something wrong, something's not as confusing or not as transparent. And those are the key things, and I'll make sure that I have that ready as an elevator speech for anyone who's continuing to ask moving forward. But yeah.
Yep. Thank y'all. We'll see y'all again soon. And I don't know how to end the video. There we go.